The birth of a beast. In the early 1940s, when the world was on fire and the skies above Europe were filled with the roar of engines and the whistle of bullets, the United States needed something new, something powerful, fast, and built to last. Out of that need, a legend was born. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a machine so big, so heavy, and so brutally strong that even the German Luftwaffe laughed when they first saw it. They called it a flying milk bottle, too large, too bulky, too slow, or so they thought. But beneath that bulky frame lay the heart of a monster, a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R 2800, double wasp engine, capable of pushing this steel beast through the clouds faster than almost anything the Allies had. The P-47 wasn't built to dance, it was built to dominate. With 8.5 zero-caliber Browning machine guns, each capable of spitting 700 rounds per minute, this plane could unleash a storm of lead, powerful enough to tear tanks apart, shred trains, and rip through enemy fighters. When it first rolled out, even American pilots weren't sure what to make of it. "It's like flying a brick," one said. But the moment they took it into combat, and the moment they felt that raw power, everything changed. The P-47 could dive like a thunderbolt, hence the name. It could take hits, come home full of holes, and still land safely. It was the toughest fighter in the Allied fleet. Pilots said you could shoot it, burn it, or break it, but you couldn't kill it. At that time, the skies over Europe belonged to the Germans. The Messerschmitt Bf-19s and the Focke-Wulf 190s were ruling the air. Slim, elegant, deadly, they danced through the clouds like predators. The Allies needed something to fight back, something to survive, and that something was the Thunderbolt. By mid-1943, the P-47 had made its debut in combat. German pilots laughed at first. They saw a big American plane, slower to climb, heavier to turn. They thought it was an easy kill. But the laughter didn't last long, because when a Thunderbolt appeared behind you, it wasn't a dogfight anymore. It was execution. It was the turning tide. When the jug struck back, by the summer of 1943, the skies over Europe were a brutal chessboard of life and death. American bomber crews flying deep into German territory knew the odds. Most never came back. The Luftwaffe's fighters, Bf-19s and Fw-19s, 0S, were masters of interception. They dove like falcons, striking bombers with deadly precision, then vanished into the clouds. But soon, the Luftwaffe began to notice a new silhouette in the distance, broad wings, a round fuselage, and that unmistakable roar of the R2800 engine. It was the P-47 Thunderbolt, and it had come to change the game. At first, the Germans underestimated it. They always did. Too slow, too fat, they joked. But when their bullets bounced off its armor and it still kept coming, they stopped laughing. Because unlike most fighters, the Thunderbolt didn't shy away from punishment. It absorbed it. Pilots would return with holes the size of fists in the wings, control cables shredded, and engines coughing smoke, and still manage to land. That kind of toughness built trust and legends. Pilots began to call it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, a name that fit perfectly. In the early missions, the P-47s mainly escorted bombers over France and Belgium. But soon, they were given a new role, ground attack. When Allied forces needed to break German supply lines, it was the Thunderbolts that dove down through flak and tracer fire, screaming just above the treetops, unleashing streams of 50-caliber rounds and 500-pound bombs on trains, convoys, and fuel depots. German soldiers began to fear the sound, a deep, thundering growl followed by the hammering of machine guns. It was said that when you heard that roar, it was already too late. Captain Robert S. Johnson was one of the first American aces to fly the Thunderbolt. On one mission, his P-47 was hit, over 200 bullet holes, oil leaking, canopy jammed. He couldn't bail out. A German FW-190 came up behind him and emptied his guns, riddling Johnson's aircraft again and again. But the Thunderbolt refused to die. Johnson brought it home, and that day he became a legend. Even the German pilot who had attacked him later said, "I shot that American plane to pieces, but it would not fall." Stories like Johnson's spread fast through the Allied airfields. Pilots who once doubted the Jug now fought to fly it. They trusted it with their lives. Because it was more than a fighter, it was a flying fortress in its own right. By late 1943 and into 1944, P-47 squadrons were everywhere. Over France, Italy, and eventually the heart of Germany itself. The Luftwaffe started to break. The Thunderbolt's long-range escorts, its relentless ground attacks, and its sheer survivability began to turn the tide of the air war. And for the first time in years, the German pilots, once proud and fearless, started to look over their shoulders. They had learned the hard way. The big American milk bottle was no joke. It was a monster that had found its purpose. Thunder in the final days. By 1944, the Allies had found their rhythm. The once invincible Luftwaffe was bleeding, losing pilots faster than it could train new ones. And in the skies above Europe, the P-47 Thunderbolt had become a symbol of American power, resilience, and revenge. Each mission was a symphony of thunder. Hundreds of P-47s sweeping across the continent, engines roaring like drums of war. They flew low, they flew fast, and they brought hell with them. Bridges, convoys, supply trains, anything that moved was fair game. When the invasion of Normandy began in June 1944, it was the Thunderbolt that cleared the way. Before the first Allied soldiers stepped onto those beaches, the Jugs had already been there, blasting German positions, cutting off reinforcements, and silencing anti-aircraft guns. On D-Day alone, the P-47 flew over 1,500 sorties. They strafed tanks, tore apart trucks, and even knocked out artillery batteries that threatened the troops below. Soldiers on the ground came to love the Jug. When they saw its stubby wings overhead, they knew they weren't alone. Some GIs even said, "If you hear that rumble in the distance, you can breathe again, because the Jugs are coming." The Thunderbolt became the hammer of the Allied advance. From France to the Ardennes, from the frozen forests of Belgium to the heart of Germany, it was there, striking fear from above. In the Battle of the Bulge, when the weather cleared, Thunderbolts tore into German armored columns like wolves among sheep. Even Tiger tanks, the pride of Hitler's army, were no match when the Jug came screaming down with rockets and bombs. But it wasn't just the firepower. It was the spirit of the men who flew it. They weren't rich or famous or looking for glory. They were young, farm boys, mechanics, dreamers, thrown into a war halfway around the world. And in the cockpit of that roaring metal beast, they found courage they didn't know they had. They fought for each other and for the hope that someday the thunder would end. By 1945, as the Reich crumbled, the skies above Germany were ruled entirely by Allied planes. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, was now in ruins. And in that final stretch, the P-47 continued to fly, escorting bombers, destroying retreating columns, and ensuring the war would never again be fought on Allied soil. When the guns finally fell silent, the numbers told the story. Over 15,000 Thunderbolts built, more than 3,700 enemy aircraft destroyed. Thousands of tanks, trains, and bridges obliterated. And most importantly, thousands of American pilots brought home alive because the Jug refused to die. After the war, newer, sleeker jets would take its place. But for the men who flew it, and the generations that followed, the P-47 remained more than a machine. It was a guardian, a friend, a piece of thunder that changed the course of history. Even today, when you hear that low, rolling growl of a radial engine at an air show, some old veterans still look up, smile, and whisper, "There she is, the Jug." Because in the story of the Second World War, the Thunderbolt wasn't just another fighter plane. It was the sound of freedom, and the storm that broke the darkness.